Hello and welcome to the SHRM Labs WorkplaceTech Spotlight. My name is Trevor Schochner. I'm a product manager at SHRM Labs, and I'll be your host for this SHRM Labs series, where we shine a spotlight on some of the most interesting future of work innovators, innovations, and issues of today. Before we get started, a couple announcements. The Workplace Tech community is now available for all SHRM members, and this is going to be your guide to all things HR technology. If you are a SHRM member, please visit workplacetechcommunity.shrm.org to learn more. The 2024 Better Workplaces Challenge Cup is in full swing. If you haven't gotten a chance to see a session, be sure to go to betterworkplaceschallengecup.com to learn more and to register for an upcoming segment. For those of you watching on LinkedIn or other social media platforms, please share this live stream and tag SHRM. You can use the hashtags SHRM Labs and Workplace Tech. I'm really excited for today's topic, and we're going to dive deep on verified credentials and also why blockchain might be the right technology to solve this. I'm really excited to have the CEO of Velocity Network Foundation, Dror Gurovich. Dror, thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be here. It seems like you're running an exciting show.
Great. Well, before we get going, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your role in your organization?
Yeah. So I'm founder and CEO of the Velocity Network Foundation, which is a nonprofit hosting 80 or 90 tech software vendors and ed tech software vendors in what is probably the most ambitious collaborative endeavor ever undertaken by labor market stakeholders, which is Velocity Network, and we'll talk about it today. Myself personally, I've been in Asia Tech my entire professional life, which is over 25 years now. Always as a founder and leader of companies, of ventures. My last endeavor before launching Velocity Network Foundation was as founder and managing partner of one of the largest Asia Tech system integrators across the EMEA region. 400 people working with the largest enterprises in the region on transforming their HR infrastructure, deploying enterprise-grade workforce management and HR suites from the likes of SAP and Oracle. And 6 years ago, I've stepped down from more responsibilities to pursue solving this mother of all problems that we saw in the data layer underlying the global labor market, and been trench digging since then to get us to where we are, me and the team around me.
That's great. I know I had an intro to the Velocity Network Foundation about 2 years ago, and since then I've learned so much and love the work that you all are doing. So I'm excited to get to finally share this with a lot of HR people who might have never heard about you and all of the great work that the Velocity Network Foundation is doing. I'd like to start with a little bit of background. Can you tell us a little bit of background about, Velocity Network Foundation and also about verified credentials as a concept?
So verifying workforce credentials remains an unsolved challenge on a global scale. And it impacts not only productivity and cost, but also compliance, legal liability, and brand. Since this is a podcast for HR folks, I'm sure I don't need to reiterate the complexity around verifying individuals' past careers, education, licenses, even identity. Now, most people don't realize that it's actually the key to one of humanity's main battlefields for the next few decades, right? I always remind people that the bloodiest revolutions in human history were the result of non-functioning job markets. And since this is what we have today, and since we are betting all that we have on more digital transformation of workplace tech and workforce management tech, when we are left without a way for people to prove their qualification over digital conduits, we're actually investing in the application layer without solving the data layer. So that's the challenge that we are solving at the Velocity Network Foundation. And since this is an issue that cannot be solved by a single vendor because of the fragmentation of data. It had to be an industry play. So we have formed the Velocity Network Foundation as the venue for the industry to come together and agree on a shared protocol and shared infrastructure that would allow people to curate their achievements in the form of verifiable credentials and share them with any relying party, with any prospective employer, with any organization in a trusted and compliant way. And that is Velocity Network Foundation.
Fantastic. And I know, obviously we're talking from the HR and the workplace perspective, but I know another big industry for you all is healthcare, and the application of, making sure that the licensing and credentials of healthcare professionals are trusted, verified, and checked, based on the Velocity protocol. I want to dive into another question to go a little bit deeper on the data layer and what you mentioned here. Verified credentials aren't necessarily a new concept. It's been around for a while, but what are some of the problems you see with the current credentialing framework? And then could you touch a little bit on how Velocity helps solve this problem?
So currently credentialing are done by what we call primary sources, meaning your university, your license issuer, your assessment processor. Work history is verified by your past employers. And if you take a single individual, in order to represent themselves in their whole selves across the labor market, they would probably need to get their data verified by, we found an average of 10 to 15 different organizations, right? A couple of employers, a couple of schools, a couple of training vendors where they took a few courses and so on and so forth. Now, those primary sources have the data about the individual, right? But that data is stored in a complex maze of siloed systems and structured using diverse data schemas. So let's say that a university is using a credentialing platform and your employer using a badging platform, and your license issuer issues your license on a different platform. All these platforms are completely disconnected, and that creates the main barriers, which are data interoperability and portability. That leaves the work of curating trusted records about the individual to the employers, while the individual just self-report on who they are and what they've done in their career. And in most cases, those employers hire professional services companies, background screeners, to curate that data, mostly manual, right? These are century-old practices of making phone calls and procuring data from siloed sources, compiling and manually compiling a portfolio of the individual's career record, and then plug it back to the employer side. So the problem is that it's an extremely fragmented data landscape, and we don't have the right conduits for portability and interoperability that will allow streamlining this process in seconds rather than in weeks, right? I would say that what we have today is much more similar to the old postal system than to the digital native world we believe we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a great analogy to compare it to. To go a little bit deeper on the actual technology that you all are building and trying to get people to buy into, it's based on blockchain. I'm curious, why is blockchain the technology that you all chose to back verified credentials and to really make a play at the whole industry?
So that is a key design principle that instructed all of our work around velocity. And the reason for that is that the fact that there's a critical need for trusted workforce credentials consolidation, and that's a given, but it remained unresolved for decades, right? It's not a new concept, but it remained unresolved for decades. And if you ask yourself, why was it remain unresolved for decades? It's because private can't own it and government can't build it. So that leaves nobody, right? Private can own it because a proprietary commercial consolidation of workforce PII, which is a clear case of sensitive PII, consolidation of that workforce PII clearly conflicts with data privacy regulators. And since the world of work is extremely global and the world of education is extremely global and they're very fragmented, then this is a winner take all play, right? There need to be one consolidated pool of credentials to really solve the problem, regardless whether you're coming from India, Philippines, US, UK, or Germany to the employer. Now, that monopolistic actor that would be created is also bound to hold significant risk for labor market stakeholders because of its monopolistic position. So private can own it. Why government can't build it? Because work and education, as I said, are extremely fragmented and extremely global, right? People move between jurisdictions, move between industries, people study abroad. Even if you take a course online, it's you and many other people from many other jurisdictions taking the same course. How would you create interoperability and portability if only one government takes this job and try to solve it? So it has to be a global play. Now, blockchain. When people address blockchain, they usually think of cryptocurrencies or of Bitcoin or Ethereum and so on and so forth. And I have to say that blockchain as an infrastructure, as a technology, is extremely complicated and probably not the most easy to work with. So why blockchain? I don't care about the technology. I care about the design pattern that blockchain is based on. And essentially, blockchain enables a disconnected community of stakeholders to trust infrastructure that is owned by no single entity. And the trust is created by the cryptography, by the code that runs the infrastructure. And the infrastructure itself is run by multiple members of that community. So there's no single entity that has its finger on the kill switch. So if we wanted to have a community of tech vendors that connect to an infrastructure to provide utility for their constituents, be it universities or employers or license issuers and so on, to be able to issue credentials, anchor them to the blockchain, and then also verify credentials against that infrastructure, we needed something that everybody would agree to use using a single data protocol, a single data exchange protocol, but also that is owned by no single entity. So we're avoiding that issue around monopolistic players, around business risks for the involved participants, and so on and so forth. So blockchain was the only way to create infrastructure that no one owns, completely public, run by separate organizations, yet everybody agrees to use. And what we've done at the Velocity Network Foundation is we've successfully brought the most influential HR tech and ad tech industry stakeholders together, as I said, over 90 vendors, to achieve unanimous consensus on Velocity as the industry-wide public data exchange protocol and decentralized infrastructure. This is what we've used. This is why we've used blockchain. It's not blockchain looking for a use case. It's a use case that can only be solved properly by the design pattern manifested by blockchain.
Yeah, it's such a great overview, and totally makes sense hearing why you picked blockchain. It's not about the technology, but about really the pattern of how it works. And just so I'm, I want to kind of distill this a little bit for the people listening. So let's say I am an employee. I am going to go to take a exam. So the way that it would work for me is I take the exam, I get the certification, and then now that certification can travel with me to any job I go to, any next university I go to. It can follow me personally. It's not stuck with an old employer. And then on the flip side, for an employer, when if I were to come to them with that credential, they are able to verify it without needing to check past employment, without needing to check with universities. It would just belong to me.
Correct. So as the world's public infrastructure for proofs of qualifications, Velocity enables a world where individuals using what we call career credentials wallets to connect with primary sources that offer them credentials based on the same protocol, right? Regardless of their system of records, because their system of record is part of Velocity Network, hence implemented the protocol. So the individual and the system of record, individual career credentials wallet and the system of records connect, and the credential travels signed by the original primary source, that university or past employer or licensed issuer, travels to the wallet where now the individual is the owner of that credential, but it's tamper proof and cryptographically secured, so the individual cannot tamper with the credential. The issuers the issuer secures the credential by writing a cryptographic key to the blockchain. So we have the credential on the wallet and the cryptographic key, which holds no personal information, on the blockchain. Now, when the individual presents the credentials to a prospective employer, that prospective employer can go to the blockchain, retrieve those cryptographic proofs, and make sure that the credential has not been tampered with, that the issuing identity has been verified, that the credential has not been revoked by the issuer for whatever reason, and so on and so forth. And that all happens in seconds. So we are moving towards a world where individuals can just share their credentials from their wallet directly with prospective employers using the Velocity, where everybody's using the same protocol, which is free, open source, and public. And those employers can verify that the credential has not been faked or been tampered with by the individual in seconds by matching those credentials to the keys that are stored on chain. That is the world that we're moving towards.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And I know we touched on this a little bit, so on how it will impact an HR team. But I guess from a functional perspective, what would it change about a verification process for a potential employee?
So, so I don't know. That's the real answer, right? Because when you have something so transformational, right, things happen that you haven't anticipated. But the baseline is that I can verify the individual's credentials in seconds, and it's all machine to machine. Nothing is manual, and that opens a whole new world of employment models and onboarding processes. For example, right? If we look at the promise that we saw in the last few years in what we call liquid talent markets, which is a fancy name for freelancers on a platform where I can, pull in resources as I go while I have my core team, but I just pull in resources as I go for a month, for 2 months, for 3 months, and so on and so forth. Maybe even leveraging the talent arbitrage cost between my jurisdiction and other jurisdictions. That hasn't picked up traction. That promise was not fulfilled, right? And if you look at freelancers platform today, the 95% of the assignments there are completely marginal. None of it is core work by the organization. And the reason for that is trust, right? How do I trust the person on the other side? How do I trust that they have the education they claim to have, that they have the identity they claim to have, that they have the qualifications they claim to have? And if I will employ background screening processes, it will take me, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and I only need this person for 2 months. So it just doesn't make sense, right? So what I do, I use I use the man in the middle, right? I use professional services firms that give me probably the same people, but with a very high margin, because I can trust them, because they have a brand and we have a contract and I can sue them and so on and so forth. So, just imagine a world where any freelancer in the Philippines would be trusted by any employer in Germany, right? That's a world that opens up so much. And that's beyond, what we see today as a mainstream process where onboarding of people would take seconds rather than weeks verifying. Now, I don't think background screeners will be out of business because of 2 things. First of all, there's a lot of information that is not static. Credentials are static, right? I went to school, that's my transcript. But criminal record, right? Yesterday, I didn't have criminal record, and maybe the authorities can issue a credential on that. But today, I may have a criminal record. So it needs to be real time. Okay, drug tests. All this is something that would continue to be handled just in time. And also, big employers, I think, they need the legal liability that comes with the work of a background screener. So, but I think background screeners will change dramatically. Their turnaround time would be capped, would be minimized. Most of what they will be able to do would be done for them by that infrastructure, and they would be able to move to higher value added services rather than that manual curation of facts from siloed sources and so on and so forth.
Yeah, very, very good way to think about it. That, some of the technology will remain the same, but be altered by this impact. Speaking of how this will impact HR, what do you think is the timeline to really bring verified credentials on the Velocity network to life? And do you think HR people will see this sooner rather than later?
So what we call mainnet is the actual decentralized infrastructure compared to testnet, where it's the testing environment where all the vendors are testing their integrations and so on and so forth. So mainnet was launched after a very long process of testing and sandboxing and late last year. Since then, 1 million people already downloaded and installed Career wallets and claimed over 1.5 million credentials from various issuers. So in terms of the protocol, its maturity, the stability of the infrastructure, that is completely tested and operational. The issue is around what we call credential density, right? For an employer to really start moving to include that verification method within their verification protocols, we need enough people in their jurisdictions or in their industry with verifiable credentials, right? And enough verifiable credentials each. Because if you hire, I don't know, 10,000 people and 3 would come with verifiable credentials, probably, you would ignore that and say, I'm going to send them through the usual process. I'm not, I'm not going to be paying attention to this until 30% will be coming with verifiable credentials. So the Velocity Network Foundation, which is led by, it's a member-led organization. So it's the vendors that orchestrate their collaborative work, is focused on creating enough density in what we call clusters to really kickstart the flywheel. And cluster is the intersection of an industry and a jurisdiction. So U.S. healthcare is a cluster, for example. U.S. healthcare organizations jumped first with their vendors, with the national license registries, and they are all working together to issue as much credentials as possible to seed that cluster so that they can really create the transformation that they need. And probably there's a reason for that. That industry is highly regulated. It has severe talent shortage, and any streamlining has a huge effect on their business. What I'm amazed at, looking at it from the sideline, because I'm not involved personally, is that 2 of the 3 largest employers in the healthcare industry, probably not the most early adopters type organizations, have jumped into this. National license registries, right? Nurses, doctors, EMTs, that type of registry, they've jumped on that as well. And I'm just at awe at how innovative these organizations are, and how seriously they're pushing this. 3 of the largest staffing firms for the healthcare industry, the largest vendors of Asia Tech to that healthcare industry, some of the largest universities that have healthcare professional programs are involved. That is really something that makes all this trench digging worthwhile. Another cluster is the Dutch banking system. So the Dutch banks have traditionally been considering themselves as the beachhead for digital innovation to the European banking system. They've launched together with their vendors, both on staffing and on Asia Tech, on Velocity a couple of weeks ago, and that has been going on very, very nicely. And then there's a lot of activity in India around credentialing and verification. So if you ask me, what would a listener to this podcast can do, is engage with their vendor, with their Asia Tech vendor, with their staffing vendor, and ask where they are with that process. Are they part of it or not? And also start issuing credentials to their employees and constituents and alumni, because this is how you seed this new world of self-sovereign data.
It's such a cool concept, and as somebody relatively young in the workforce, it's exciting to know that, like, hopefully one day we'll own all of our own career data, right? And I think that's the dream.
The current situation is insane. I mean, you went to school, you get some kind of a professional license or certification. You did all you could to work for two marquee employers, right? That are big brands, and you say, okay, that's now these are now my career assets, but they're not yours, because when you try to represent them, and the employer says, okay, I need third parties to verify that. These third parties can refuse the verification, maybe go out of business, maybe uh, put restrictions in the form of cost. So it's your reputation, but it's held by third parties. That's insane, right? And I'm sure that my kids, I have little kids. I'm sure that when my kids, you know, enter the workforce, and I will tell them about this, they will think that that is an insane situation, right? And the self sovereignty piece and the ownership piece and the empowering of people by letting them own their career reputation in a portable and trusted way, that is a big part of what motivates me.
That's so great to hear, and really insightful. This is something that is going to be a big change, and it's not going to be super fast, but it will impact HR down the line. So it's always good to be ahead and kind of on the bleeding edge of what's happening. So as we kind of wrap up here, I'd love to give you a second to list any resources or direct the audience wherever you'd like them to, whether it's to your work, Velocity Networks, Foundation's work. Just feel free to give them any resources that you think are valuable.
So Velocity Network Foundation is a nonprofit organization that develops public goods, right? So we, on the VelocityNetwork.Foundation website, we have a huge section called Learn, where you have every fact or piece of documentation anyone would need in order to understand what Velocity Network is, how they become a part of it, what's the reward model for early adopters, and so on and so forth. That's one thing. And if you're a tech enthusiastic, there's also a section called Developers, where you have robust technical documentation on how to, and everything is open source, so people can start playing with the tech if they feel the urge to do that. Everything is open, everything is public. So that's what we do.
That's great. Well, thanks so much, Dror, for joining us today. It's been such a great conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you for having me, and it was a wonderful conversation.
Well, thanks so much. If you'd like to learn more about the Velocity Network Foundation and how they're innovating in the workplace, please visit their website. It's velocitynetwork.foundation. If you enjoyed this live stream, please share it with the hashtags SHRM Labs, Workplace Tech, and SHRM. You can visit us at shrmlabs.com to stay up to date. We will see you all next time. Thanks so much.